Again, I'm Mary Del Hayes. I'm with Stopgap Solutions, and I have the privilege of working with the Together SC team on a number of initiatives. One of which coming down the pipeline is our compensation and benefits study. So later this summer, you will get access and hear lots of reporting about information that we've collected from more than 500 nonprofits across the state of South Carolina about their salary and benefits information. And as part of that, we felt like, well, it's not very fair to tell you all of that and not give you the tools to do anything about it. So today is a kickoff for some of the upcoming events that we'll have as we prepare for the comp benefit study. I'm excited to bring you three wonderful friends of mine. We're going to get started with Franklin Buchanan with Post Up Careers. I've known Franklin for a long time, and he is one of the most generous, kind people to work with, and he's really good at what he does. And what he does is help people make sure that their resumes gain traction and advance them towards their career goals. And so I know he'll give you a full overview of his company and how he can help you along the way, and some information about modern resume writing. Then we're going to move over to speak with Christy Anderson with Willis HR to talk about salary and benefits negotiation strategies. A lot of us are never taught about how do you even come back and negotiate a salary or a different benefit package than what's initially offered to you. I know that I did not get the benefit of learning anything about negotiations until I worked on my MBA a few years ago. And so we thought that would be some critically important information, especially through the lens of working with nonprofits where we know you may not have the most generous budget to work with. And then finally, we'll close out with Shannon Talent of Talent HR. And Shannon's going to talk to us about how to depart with dignity. So we know that it's not an uncommon experience at some point in your career to experience either a termination, or we know that eventually all of us are going to quit a job. Either, maybe we'll win the lottery and go off to greener pastures and just be very benevolent philanthropists for the rest of our lives, or maybe you just get a better opportunity. And so Shannon's going to offer some strategies and tips about how to navigate leaving an organization with your reputation intact. We all know that in South Carolina, often who you know is more important than what you know. And so we want to make sure that we're all prepared to protect our professional reputations. And so before I turn it over to Franklin, we've got a fun poll question. We're going to show the results. The answers are a little bit all over the place. And so you can see we're almost pretty evenly mixed. Thankfully, most people are updating their resume more than every 5 years. But it looks like everybody else is kind of evenly split between quarterly, once a year, and only if they're actively looking. So thank you again for participating in our poll. And we will get started. I'm going to turn it over to Franklin and let him take it away.
All right. Thank you, Mary Del. I do want to, as I start my screen share, piggyback on something you said. In South Carolina, it's often not about what you know, but who you know. Take that one step further. And it's not necessarily about who you know as much as it is about who knows you. Just keep that in mind as we go through these things. So I appreciate the wonderful words. I've known Mary Del for a long time. Before some of y'all joined, I realized that I've known Ben for a while too. So I'm looking forward to talking with you today about personal branding. Now, let's go ahead and get our virtual presentation bingo cards out and go ahead and mark an X around. Can everybody see my screen? I will take the silence as an affirmative. Welcome. I'll do a quick introduction of me, but let's run through the agenda. What is personal branding and what does it have to do with your job search? That is going to be the crux of our conversation today. And then we're going to talk about how to elevate it during a job search. This is supposed to be an interactive session. I want your participation. In fact, you will be participating as we go through this. We're going to do a couple of exercises. You're going to be a hiring manager at one point, and then we're going to do a keyword exercise, which should be fun. And then I will obviously take questions at the end. Who am I? Why am I here? And why should you listen to me? My name is Franklin Buchanan. I'm the owner of Post Up Careers. My background has been in talent acquisition. Spent 15 years in it, working for some of the largest recruiting companies on the planet, both as a recruiter and selling recruiting services. So I worked on both sides of the hiring process with candidates and hiring managers. With that always came resume writing. So it was always something I did for family and friends. One day in 2014, my brother-in-law came to me. He was a teacher applying to be an assistant principal, and he asked me for help with his resume. And so, of course, I wrote it. And he got the interview and he got the job. And on the day that he got his offer letter, he came by my house, and I was still living in Columbia at that point. But he dropped me off a 6-pack of beer to thank me for it. I was appreciative of that. But he told me how much cheaper it was than the resume writer he'd spoken with. Additionally, the resume writer he'd spoken with, he didn't like how impersonal that process was. So I said, all right, let's get the big thing out of the way first. Tell me how much it was going to cost. And it was $250 an hour. And so that night in 2014, I created a profile on Thumbtack, which is a service matching website. And I got my first paid client. And so I started writing resumes as a profitable hobby. From there, did that for a little bit. I got picked up by some of the larger resume companies. So I started freelancing resumes for monster.com, the ladders.com clients. I did that for a couple of years, but that process largely became impersonal as I did it. And I didn't like that. And so at the end of 2018, I cut up all those contracts. I took all the money I made writing resumes that year, put it into a website, and that's how Post Up Careers got launched. I wanted to do this personally. It's your job search. It can't just be done over email. And so 2018, 2019, company is launched. It steadily grew until May the 4th of last year. May the 4th was with me when I was able to leave my day job and do this full time. I'm a certified professional career coach, and I help my clients with a variety of things, including resume writing, career coaching, LinkedIn profile development, mock interviews, salary negotiations, and job search assistance. That's me. Let's now start talking about you. Before we do that, though, I want to tell you I love being interrupted. If you have questions, ask them. If you want to chime in, chime in. I got a 3-year-old. I'm used to it. I like it. It makes the presentation a heck of a lot more fun. But now my question for you all is, what do you consider to be your personal brand in a job search? You can just take
I
yourself
always
off
think
mute.
about, like, with our nonprofit organizations, they have like a mission statement and a vision and values. And so I kind of try to think about the same thing for myself when I'm working on my brand. So what am I centered on or focused on? What are my uncompromisable values? And how do I use those so people can quickly figure out who I am? Okay,
your values. Elizabeth put in the chat your reputation. Feel free to use the chat. I have now located where it actually is so I can pull it up and you guys can see it. So thinking about those two answers, your reputation and your values, how do you communicate those values? How do you communicate your reputation in a job search?
Franklin, I would say people see me as a connector.
Connector.
In our community.
Okay. But how do you go about communicating that when you want people to know that you're a connector? You want them to know your values. What are the tools that you use in a job search?
LinkedIn for sure.
There's one. Resume, Tamara, good. Then put a pin on references. Let's bring that back up at the question, at the Q&A part, because I think there's an excellent point being made about that. So it's your resume, it's your cover letter, and it's your LinkedIn profile. And these are the 3 things that we're going to talk about today. Let's start with the big guy, the resume. What is it? Somebody tell me what a resume is. And y'all feel free to use the chat.
I would say in simple layman's terms, your resume is your about me section.
Okay.
It's very personal. It goes through your experiences, and depending on the verbiage, it can help you expound on those experiences and convey yourself to your targeted audience.
Gotcha. It's your about me section. a written description of skills, education, abilities, a record of work and skills and education. You guys are getting the high level. I'm going to tell you what most people's resumes are. Most people's resume is simply a bulleted list of tasks and responsibilities. And so how do we elevate it? If most people's resume is a bulleted list of tasks and responsibilities, how do you stand out and elevate that?
I think you have to use keywords from the job search. for
Keywords,
example.
there's part of it.
Yes.
And then why would we want to elevate it? Graphic design. All right, there's another one that we're going to come back to, Ben, because I just had this conversation about an hour ago about that. Achievements rather than general job duties. Yes, and in Kara, you needed to tell a story of who you are. Yes. If most people are just telling you what they do, they're not telling you how good they are at it. And if you really want to stand out on your resume, tell everyone how good you are at it. Now, you're writing your resume for two audiences. We're going to talk about the human audience first, even though they're the ones that read it second. A human is going to look at your resume for a grand total of 6 seconds before making a decision on whether or not to move forward with you in some form or fashion. Now, depending on the recruiter you ask, depends on what they do after the 6 seconds. For me, in the 15 years that I did it, the 6 seconds determined whether or not I was going to continue reading and call you at the same time. So now, put yourself in the seat of somebody hiring a career coach. I'm going to show you two examples, the two most common resume layouts that I see come across my desk every single day. We're going to look at them for 6 seconds, and you're going to tell me what stands out. Let me minimize, and we're going to go to the first one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now we're going to go to the second one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, time. Tell me what you guys noticed on those resumes.
Franklin, we didn't get to see their resumes.
Oh,
Yeah,
you
we
did?
just see
didn't.
resume, I'm good at stuff.
Oh, let's try that again.
We gotta change the screen. There we go.
All right, can you see now?
No. We see
All
your
right, let me, oh, you know what? It's sharing that window.
have to
So let me
stop
reshare. All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's one. Here comes the other. Go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. What'd you guys get out of that?
I saw the names of the companies you worked for.
Okay.
You
What else did
saw,
y'all get out of
on the
that?
second one, you saw the bullet points of achievements or numbers, data about what you've accomplished.
Mm-hmm.
The second one's way easier to read.
Mm-hmm. So second was a little formatted, a little bit nicer, but like, did you get any sort of sense of who I am or what I do? If you didn't know me, would you have any earthly ideas to what I could do for you, what I could bring to the table? No. I mean, maybe you caught one
Not
or
in
two of them.
6 seconds.
Yeah. But that's the key. That's what you're up against in a job search. And that's not even taking into account the technology that's scanning it. So we're going to come back to that. But I want to go to back to making it more actionable. I work with a lot of nonprofit clients, and a lot of, most nonprofits, as Mary Bell put out, they can be somewhat budget strapped. And so from my experience, a lot of executive directors of nonprofits often manage their own social media account, especially in the smaller ones. And so this is a fairly common bullet point that I pull off of some of my nonprofit client resumes, off their old resumes: managed social media accounts. Now it's your turn. First question that I have for you: in order to elevate this bullet, what do we need to know?
We need to know if you increased the followers or engagement. Did it lead to revenue generation? Or did you manage like a high level crisis on social media that occurred? Like, what happened as a result?
Yeah. So we want to know how many followers did you start with? How many followers did you grow to? What kind of content you're putting on there? Well, the end result was increase. What else? You guys are hitting the super duper high notes, which I really like. So followers, increase. We said ROI. Which ones, Elizabeth? Are you talking about which social media accounts?
Yes.
Yeah. Which social media accounts? Okay, so I'm going to give you some information, and then I want you to all take 60 seconds and enter a new bullet point in the chat. We started with 100 followers. We increased to 500 using organic content across 4 platforms. All right. Take 60 seconds as best you can and type a new bullet in the chat. Go. Started at 100, increased to 500 with organic content across 4 platforms. Okay, starting to see some good ones come through. About 20 more seconds. Don't worry, it doesn't have to be perfect. This is just practice. When I coach basketball, I'd always tell my players in a dribbling drill, if you're not dribbling the ball off your foot, you're not trying hard enough. Okay, time. Everybody hit enter. Let's see what else you got. Interesting. Okay. Starting to see a lot of commonality in it. Take it a little bit further. I'm going to nitpick a couple. So Elizabeth, your last one I've got up here. You wrote out 4 months. The only thing I would change there is use the number. We're going to get to that in a minute. But I like that you utilize the start of your bullet point with action: increased social media followers on multiple platforms. Define the platforms from 100 to 500 in 4 months using organic and grassroots content. I think it was Ben that put a percent in there. Grew company social media presence by 500% across multiple platforms. Teresa in 4 months. Do you guys see the difference? And just taking this plain Jane bullet point and making it more actionable, how that will help you stand out. There might be questions before I move forward. Okay, now we're going to do part 2 of the 6-second resume test. Now that I know that I need to stop my share and come back to it. I'm going to pull up a different version of my resume, and we're going to look at it for 6 seconds, and we're going to see if you guys see a difference in layout. Ready? Go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What did you guys get out of that one?
That
Saw
one
this-
was, sorry, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
That one was much easier to read, but it also listed all of your accomplishments and it would make me want to call you.
Mm-hmm. Layout's half the battle. Resume's got to look good. It's like Deion Sanders. If you look good, you play good. But there's a balance with it. If you saw it for more than 6 seconds, which I didn't let you do, you would see that there's a balance of descriptive content versus actionable content. And I'm going to tell you about that why in a minute. But this is the primary reason why. The applicant tracking system. Does anyone know what an applicant tracking system is? It's any time you apply for a job online, your resume is getting sent into some sort of filter. And so there are rules that
Their application for a job with their resume and such, the employer can see a list of all the applicants that have applied online, view their resumes, view any other information like their cover letters, and then also there's like drop down menus so you can assign them a specific like ranking, like follow up with later, or advance to the next stage, or this is the person I'm going to hire, or we chose not to hire this person. It lets us organize that information.
Yep, exactly. To Ben's point though, that system is operated by a human. But when you apply for a job online, you're not just going straight into a black hole, you're going into software that someone's going to go in, enter a keyword string, and it's going to sort your resume. In order for that software to sort your resume, make sure your resume does not contain tables, graphics, or images, because that can jumble the system. You'll notice the layout that I had mine in was a single column layout. I see a lot of resumes with a dual column, meaning you've got your education, your certification, your skills on the left side, and then you've got your experience on the right side. Those do not function well within an applicant tracking system. The software is scanning resume. So when you enter, if I enter a word search for executive director, and you have maybe partnered with the executive director to do whatever, but if it's in a double column, and executive director is at the end or executives at the end and directors on the next line, it's going to go executive, what's ever in this other column, and then director. And so it's splitting the keywords that's being searched for up. Unless otherwise specified in a job description, use a Word doc or a Google Doc with your online application. Most applicant tracking systems are going to parse those a lot easier than if you do a PDF. The software is catching up to PDFs. That's why I say, unless otherwise specified in a job description, use a Word or Google Doc when applying online. If you're attaching a cover letter, save it as a separate attachment. And then you notice I had a skill section on my resume. Read through a job description and match up keywords that you see to your skill section. Caveat, make sure you're actually good at it. If I saw a job for a recruiter and it asked for Microsoft Excel, I couldn't put Microsoft Excel in my skill section because I'm bad at it. Okay, now it's your turn. I pulled this job description off of Indeed yesterday. It's an executive director of a foundation job. Take 60 seconds, read through it, and then in the chat, I want you to type the keywords that you feel like you're seeing, and we're going to talk through that. So 60 seconds starting now. Read through the job description, write down the keywords that stand out to you, and we'll talk about keywording in the resume. Okay, there's a few. Foundation, fundraising, marketing, board of trustees. And time. All right, everybody else hit enter. Board leadership, strategic planning. You guys are hitting a lot of the high notes. A good rule of thumb is look for sort of, I don't know if hard skills is the right word, but things like compliance, things like strategic plan, fundraising. Ultimately, the things that you're going to have to do. That is what you want to look for when you're looking for keywords in a resume. And then make sure they're in your skills section. And that as you're working in your resume, that you're kind of working them in a little bit. The reality is, if you've been in nonprofit for a while, you're already going to have a lot of these in your resume. And then that's the case whether it's HR applying for HR, IT applying for IT. Because the basics are always going to be the same. But you can use the skill section to take a guess, because it is guesswork, off of the keywords from a job description and put them into your resume. But again, I stress, make sure you are, in fact, good at them. If you're going to put fundraising in there, be a good fundraiser. Anybody have any questions about that before I move on? Other resume best practices. Oh. Make sure your name is in the file name. Recruiters are unorganized by nature. You see this pretty background that I have here, but you have no idea what's outside of the camera. Oftentimes, if you're sending your resume directly to a recruiter, they may not even get it in the applicant tracking system until the very end. They're searching for you by email or by file name in the email. So if your name is not in the file name, if it's just resume, you might get lost. First name dot last name dot resume. First name underscore last name underscore resume. Resume of first name, last name. Put your name in the file name of the resume. Use a clean font. Does anyone know what the most common resume font is? Anybody want to take a guess?
Times New Roman.
Bingo. Times New Roman. If that's the most common resume font, is that a font that you want to use?
No.
No. There's a whole bunch of fonts that you can use. I say clean. I'm going to give you a couple. Cambria, Calibri, and Franklin Gothic Book are the three that I use the most often. No, not Franklin Gothic Book because it has my name in it. I like it. It feels executive level when you look at it. And so for directors and above, I'll typically use that font. But I've also used Helvetica, I've used Century, I've used Roboto, I've used Georgia. I've even used Arial a couple of times where I felt like it made sense. But the one font I've never used is Times New Roman. Plus it's a stuffy font. Always use numbers when quantifying. We talked about this with 4 months. A couple of you spelled out 4 months. Put the number down, because in a document full of words, what grabs attention? Numbers. Add your LinkedIn URL to your contact information. Make sure your contact information is front and center, not at the bottom, not in a corner on the bottom, at the very top of the resume. I don't care if it's in the left, right, or center, but it needs to be the very top of your resume. Your name, your email, the best single phone number to reach you on, probably your cell phone, and your LinkedIn URL. The first thing a recruiter does after we've looked at your resume and determined we want to move forward is pull you up on LinkedIn. Make it easy for them to find you. Proofread it. And then proofread it again. And then proofread it one more time. A word processor will catch a misspelling or a grammatical error with the little blue squiggly line or little red squiggly line. And so it knows how to spell proofread or place or board or executive. It does not know your email address, and it does not know your phone number. And lastly, put your resume to work. It's not about what you know, it's about who you know. It's not about who you know, it's about who knows you. Only 2% of online applicants will be called in for a job interview. 75% of jobs, according to LinkedIn, are still filled through referrals. So put your resume to work. Speaking of LinkedIn, here's some stats for you. And there's two routes that you can use an updated LinkedIn profile. I'm going to mainly talk about job search, but I'll touch on the second part. Just a fun few stats. That second one, I see 50 million businesses, but I put myself in the shoes of a nonprofit and I see 50 million potential donors. And the people that make the decisions to donate. But then there's the job postings, 14 million. That number to me is low based on an article I saw on TikTok about LinkedIn. 2022, everyone. There was an article that I think it was from Forbes that said 90% of recruiters are using LinkedIn for their recruitment services. And so if your profile is not up to date, you're not getting noticed. So some good best practices with LinkedIn. Professional photo. Your profile will be looked at 14 times more if you have a professional photo. No need to hire a photographer and do this. Grab your phone, put it on portrait mode, go outside in a little bit of an overcast day for the best light. Have a friend, family member, spouse, neighbor, coworker take your profile picture outside in front of a brick wall, a fence, a tree, a bush. There you go. Most people can't quite figure out how to write LinkedIn. My clients and I have found the most success with a narrative. First person, writing to whoever you want your audience to be, whether it's a recruiter, whether it's a board of director, or whether it's a potential donor. What's the message you're trying to convey? Connect and follow up. You wouldn't just go to the local chamber of commerce meeting, introduce yourself to somebody, and then walk away never to speak to them again, would you? That's what most people do on LinkedIn. They connect with you and then nothing. No follow-up. Yeah, Ben's amazed at how many people have blank LinkedIn profiles. It's such a missed opportunity. Be consistent on LinkedIn. What do I mean by that? I mean, with posting on LinkedIn, if you're going to post, do it consistently. That's how you build a following and you build a brand. I post 3 times a week. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. On Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, I always have higher engagement than any other day because I do it consistently. I posted something today on LinkedIn. It's got lower because I don't really do much on Tuesdays. And LinkedIn, I guess, gets taken aback by it. But LinkedIn knows on Monday morning, I'm posting a video. We did the quick run through. So let's go to the cover letter. Does anybody have, before we do that, does anybody have any questions about LinkedIn before I go into your cover letter? The other thing about LinkedIn is the thing that I never see from nonprofits, organizations, and individuals. LinkedIn is full of business owners and leaders offering advice and tips. whether they're small businesses like me offering career management tips, whether they are CEOs of Microsoft offering business management tips, talent acquisition leaders offering recruitment best practices. I never see nonprofit leaders on LinkedIn talking about what they do, why it's important. And so if I don't see it and I live on the platform, what does that tell you? There's an opportunity to be heard. Moving on to your cover letter. The biggest misconception about a cover letter is that it's about you. It's not. The cover letter is always about the job that you're applying for. And I'm going to give you a good structure for a cover letter. It should be short, sweet, and to the point. When you're writing your first paragraph, ask yourself, what's this job wanting me to do? And speak to that. And your second paragraph, how does my overall experience translate to that? And your third paragraph, how does my current job translate to it? What questions do you guys have?
Franklin, how long is too long for a cover letter? I mean, does it depend on like the level of job you're applying for, or do they all need to be less than a page?
Less than a page without question. 4 paragraphs, 2 to 3 sentences each. The thing about cover letters, there's 2 types of recruiters. When I recruited, I did not read your cover letter. It's what I was going to go to the resume. But for every recruiter like me who's not going to read your cover letter, there's a variant of me who swears by cover letters and think they're the greatest thing in the world. I personally think the job search process is already hard enough. The silliest thing I ever saw was a client of mine, CEO. An executive recruiter hit him up about an opportunity and asked him to submit a resume and cover letter to the board. And he said, I'm not going to do that. And the recruiter said, well, why not? And he goes, because you called me. And I thought to myself, I wish every job seeker had that moxie. We could take the Great Resignation a lot further. What other questions do you guys have? I'll throw my contact info up on there so you can have it.
Going back to how long things should be, should your resume, should your resume fit on 1 page as well? Or is 2 pages okay when you're getting longer in your career? Or?
My resume is 2 pages. There's nothing wrong with a 2-page resume. Never sacrifice content for page length. Now, the reality is recruiters and hiring managers are really only looking at your last 7 to 10 years of experience. So that's where you want to put the majority of your focus. But the rest of your experience might tell a story of your rise from administrative assistant to project coordinator to communications manager to development manager to executive director, right? That's a rise through the ranks that demonstrates your upward mobility. You want to spell that out and lay it out. But maybe you get to that executive director, you go up a few, and that, you don't necessarily really need to dig in on that admin experience. You can always footnote it. But there's nothing wrong with a 2-page resume.
And should you be including your like your other volunteer or community service, or does that not go anymore?
In my opinion, that's best on the LinkedIn profile. And it's not typically something that I would put on the resume unless it's impactful or if it's relevant. Ben has a question. Do people ask for CVs anymore? It depends on what you're applying for. It's not something I see a lot of in nonprofit, but maybe if you were going to like an academic focused nonprofit or a medical focused nonprofit, I could see that being the case. I see CVs in academia, medicine, law, engineering, and I'm starting to see them more in accounting.
Huh. I asked because when I was doing a brief stint as an adjunct faculty at U of SC, I had they asked me for my CV every single year, even though it was just really renewing my contract. And but they wanted my CV, and I was just like, the first year I was like, I don't even have one. I had to make it. And now, you know, it's just sort of like, I know Madeline's on this call. Madeline, I'm not updating my resume. But you know, when I had to update my resume for that same experience, I started keeping everything on the CV and just having the CV be a data dump of all the stuff I've ever done in my entire life. And then I could just pick from it for the resume.
Yep. The only difference between a CV and a resume is length. I was working a client of mine, she's the dean of a dental school up in the Northeast, and her CV is 26 pages. University of South Carolina hired me to consult on the presidential search, to take the CVs of all the finalists and condense them into executive summaries for the board. The shortest CV, I think, was 16 pages, 16 or 17, and the longest was like 96. Yeah, that was a fun
A
one.
novel.
Yeah.
All those journal publications add up.
Yep. Mhm.
Franklin, we were going to talk about references. Can we go back to that? Do references even matter? And what are we doing with references these days?
Yes. So don't put references on your resume. That's a waste of space. A better way to utilize your references, going back to who you know and who knows you, is to get them to open doors. Most of your references can speak to you professionally. So maybe they're a board member or a former board member or an executive director of another nonprofit. Go to them in your career search, because remember, 75% of jobs are still filled through referrals. And let them know, hey, I'm starting a job search. Would love to get your feedback on where I might go next. I've got some interest in a larger nonprofit, or I'm in development, want to get into operations. Their references should be door openers for you, not closers.
Is like if a former employer gives you a letter of reference, is that at all useful, or is that something that nobody's going to look at, or do you really need to be able to list that phone call and have a direct contact?
If you can get, if they're willing to write you a letter of reference, they're willing to write a direct contact. It's okay to have a reference. If you put in a job for an application and for another nonprofit, odds are that board of directors is online. Have your reference, call that board chair and say, hey, I know Mary Dale really well. She did X, Y, and Z for me. She told me she'd applied. I wanted to call and give her my full endorsement. That's going to be so much more impactful than you attaching a reference sheet in your application packet. That's probably not going to get read. Additionally, references aren't even really checked thoroughly by most companies anymore. There's now automated systems that will check references for you, and all they really do is verify dates of employment due to a whole bunch of lawsuits in the late 2000s. God, that just made me feel old. When I was working recruiting, that's when we started to see that span. It's an art to get a good reference out of somebody now. What other questions do you guys have?
Don't y'all all jump in at once.
I know, seriously, come on. Throw me a fastball, throw me a curveball.
I can talk about this all day long. I find it fascinating, but I might be the only one.
How often should you update your resume? Going back to the poll question, do it at least once a year. Or if you don't want to do that, create a Google Doc, a OneNote, a Word, anything. And anytime you do something, that you're proud of, that's actionable, just put it in there, because that's a future resume bullet. It's a future interview story. And it's a good way to keep your content relevant without having to constantly update your resume. I call it your success story bank. You complete a project, you finish a capital campaign, $10 million additional, there, put in the success story bank. Upgraded your facilities 2 months under your timeline, success story bank. Everybody knows for the most part what you do as an executive director, as a development manager, as a communications manager. Recruiters have an idea. We have a very good idea, your day-to-day. And so when you're putting your resume together, give a high-level overview of your day-to-day, but then make your bullet points actionable. Have you found that older job seekers are having a hard time finding a job? Teresa, not really. Ageism definitely exists, but it's not unique to mature audiences. It's not just somebody in their late 50s, early 60s. Ageism happens for new graduates. Ageism happens for people in the middle of their career. The reality of ageism is that someone's going to judge you based off of a number. You don't want to work for them anyway. But there's also a reality of unconscious bias. It happens. Somebody's overqualified, somebody's underqualified. How do you combat that? Demonstrating action in your resume. Showing the things that you have accomplished. Okay, this person gets it. If you're overqualified, that's a battle that's not just about age. Maybe you want to dial it back some. A good way to combat, I mentioned footnoting your previous experience on my resume. And let me see if I've still got it up. I'll show you how I did it. Yeah, let me share the screen with you really quickly. I'll show you how to footnote your early experience. Just like this. Additional experience as XYZ at ABC when. How do you feel about cold connecting with people on LinkedIn? How do we connect with people we don't know or in a different part of the network? Great question. LinkedIn allows you 300 characters to make an introduction. And I always recommend that you utilize those characters. Even if it's just a, hey, I see we play in the same space. Or try to make as much of a connection as you can. Look at their profile, but use that 300 characters to give them a reason as to why you're trying to connect. And then after you've connected with them, reach out, send them a message. Thank you for the connection. I wanted to connect because of, don't try to immediately sell them something. Have a good reason. What other questions do you guys have? You speak about recruiting employees and staff, communicating to applicants after hiring someone. Yes, Deborah. So here's the thing about recruiters in 2022. When the pandemic hit in 2020, the #1 industry that lost its people were recruiters. They were the first people that got let go. Because no one was hiring. And so what was the point of having recruiters? Now it's the #1 industry on LinkedIn. There were more recruiting jobs posted on LinkedIn yesterday than there were software engineers. So what does that tell you? Recruiters are understaffed and overworked because in this great reshuffle, resignation, whatever you call it, there's a lot going on. Keep that in mind. Recruiters are not working on behalf of you. They're working on behalf of whatever job they're working on. They are dealing with a minimum of 200 applicants. and it's possible you may get lost in the shuffle. Now, does that excuse ghosting? Absolutely not. When I recruited, I always sent a message out to everybody that didn't get the job. The job was closed. We've hired somebody else. Now, I had automated software to do that for me. I clicked one button, 175 people got a notification. The rest of those 25 from those 200 were people that I worked with. Of those 25, I said we brought in maybe 3 or 4 for an interview. The rest of those 22 got a mass email from me. It looked personal, that told them, thank you for applying. I've decided to move. We're moving forward with different candidates. Please keep in mind whatever it might be. And of the 3 people that came in for an interview, if they didn't get the job, I would always call them and tell them why. That was me. You should always follow up with people that you're hiring and the ones that you're not hiring, even if it's just to say jobs closed. Should you give feedback? There's legalities involved with that. It's an unfortunate reality of society in 2022, but you can get sued for telling somebody I didn't hire you because I hired someone with more experience. Okay, now we've just done age discrimination. So just be careful if you're giving that feedback.
That stinks because I mean, we've had I don't want to be that person who's on the hiring side who says, just leaves you with the cold, like, thank you, we've gone in a different direction. Because it doesn't, I've been on the other end of that where it's like, sorry, we didn't choose you. And I'm like, I want to know why, damn it. Sorry. I want to know why, because it's frustrating because how could I have applied better? How could I have done that? I mean, I see your point, but I don't want to leave somebody. And then there's the other thing. What if this person might get hired by another nonprofit organization and I have to interact with them sometime in the future and they might remember we decided not to hire you. Have a lovely life. It's a hard balance.
It is. It's unfortunate. If they show up late to an interview, I mean, that's happened. I've told somebody, you didn't get the job because you were 20 minutes late to the interview. Had you been on time, you probably would have gotten it because they loved you, but reliability is important. But if it's because of experience, if it's because of anything else, you gotta be careful with that. Any other questions?
Any final questions for Franklin as we wrap up and prepare to? I'm going to throw a poll question up while we start this transition. So what is your current search status? We will not know who says what to this question, so do not be afraid to answer. But are you happy where you are, but trying to grow your salary benefits? Are you looking for a new opportunity? Are you happy where you are, but open to offers? We're really curious. Again, nobody will know actually what you answer. We will just see the aggregate results at the end. So don't be afraid of being outed.
I'll go ahead and give you a stat on this. 75%, I think it's 75 of currently employed people in the United States are considered passive job seekers. They may not be actively looking, but they'll listen. Let's see if poll results reflect that.
Well, while we're waiting on folks to answer this, Franklin, did you hear the story about the person who did he get arrested for changing the compensation on his offer letter in order to make a case to his employer that he should get a raise?
No, I did not see that.
It was in the financial sector. It was in Wall Street somewhere, and they were regulated by the Federal Reserve, and so dude was arrested.
Could you email me that?
Yeah, I'll dig it up.
I would love to see that. Don has an excellent question in the chat. Do you owe it to your board to let them know that you're looking? COLA is so small. My recommendation is to keep your job search to yourself and among trusted contacts. Is that a board member? Hard to know. But in my experience, once organizations find out someone's looking, they immediately move to begin replacing them. and all of a sudden the clock has started on your job search. You don't owe your board anything other than your fiduciary responsibilities as an executive director and doing the best job that you can. Should you inform your board that you're looking? I probably wouldn't, but maybe you have a trusted contact on there that understands your situation.
I'll have to
Again.
say to that, when I was an executive director, I would have been like, of course, I love my board loves me. And now that I'm on the other side, I'm like, don't tell them. Well, this is interesting. So it looks like most of our folks are claiming they're happy where they are, but want to increase their compensation and benefits. Who doesn't want to do that? We've got one very honest person who's saying they're actively searching, and then we've got a smaller number of people who are open to offers. But I think that when you're on LinkedIn, it's really hard when a recruiter contacts you to just say straight up, no, I'm not interested in hearing what you have to say.
To that point, if a recruiter contacts you on LinkedIn and you're not interested, please tell them. We've talked about ghosting. Hey, thanks for reaching out. I'm not interested, but if I think of anything or anybody, I'll certainly pass them on.
Good advice.
If you don't respond, then you're not burning a bridge, but you're certainly not creating one either. If you do respond, you're potentially opening a bridge that maybe leads to a future placement.
Good advice. So we've talked a little bit about getting that resume all polished up. We've figured out that everybody wants to make a little bit more money. Franklin, thank you so much for being with us this afternoon and getting us kicked off. Getting this day kicked off. I'm thinking about this business worker altering the job thing, getting kicked out.
That's amazing.
People will
I
do
can't wait to
anything
read that, Ben. Thank you for having me. I enjoyed speaking with you. If anybody has any questions, y'all have my contact information. Don't hesitate to reach out. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.
And if you're watching the recording, you'll see the slides and contact information attached for Franklin. We know you'll want to be in touch. It's always good to have a friend on your side when you're getting your resume dusted off, especially if it's the first time in a long time. Time is money, money is time. I think it would be incredibly worthwhile to have somebody like Franklin on your team to make your resume updating process efficient and effective. So thank you again, Franklin, for being here as we transition to the lovely Christy Anderson of Willis HR to talk about how to negotiate salary and benefits. I had never learned about negotiations until I was in my MBA program in my 30s. And boy, would those skills have been an asset earlier in my career. You think about lost earning potential compounding over time. The sooner we get good at negotiating salary and benefits, the better off we all are over time. And so I am really excited to introduce Christy, who is new to the Palmetto State from the far side of California. She's come here to be closer to her parents in the Myrtle Beach area. So look her up when you're down that way. And Christy, we're excited to learn from you. I'm going to pull up your slides. And
Thank you.
Get going.
All right. So I'm going to just start with the first slide, and this is a little bit about me. I want to first off say thank you for inviting me to participate in the program today. I am Christy Anderson from Willis HR. I have been working in HR and recruiting for over 20 years. Joined Willis HR in March of this year as a recruiter and an HR consultant. And I'm excited to share some experience today to help anyone feel better prepared for an upcoming negotiation. I will be talking today about salary negotiation for current employees from that viewpoint, as well as those who maybe are seeking new job opportunities. As I start, I want to kick it off with what is negotiation, and that's going to be the slide we're looking at right now. Negotiation to me is a discussion aimed at reaching an agreement between the parties involved. By the term negotiation, I mean an open, strategic dialogue that is supposed to resolve an issue between the parties concerned by helping them reach an agreement. I say strategic as when we plan our path, and if we prepare for the discussion, we tend to feel more comfortable in the process. On this slide, you're going to see a quote from JFK. Let us never negotiate out of fear, but let us never fear to negotiate. I added this as I think often people are maybe nervous or uncertain and maybe even fearful about negotiation. And sometimes when we're fearful about negotiation, what might happen? We might avoid it, or we might jump into a discussion without a plan. And sometimes these things may work in our favor, and sometimes they don't. I feel, with the US, we have a little bit of a wage gap, and some of that can be attributed to some employees are totally ready and willing to negotiate. And again, some are not. Not all of that wage gap is based only on negotiation, but there's a piece of it. And we're going to go on to the next slide, salary negotiation process. So today we're going to talk about the process and the steps that are involved in that process. First step being when you should not negotiate. I know that sounds weird, right? But there are times you shouldn't. We'll touch on how to prepare for negotiation discussions to hopefully make them go smoothly and in your favor, how to build arguments to support your case on why you require a different salary, benefits, whatever it is you're looking to achieve, how to lean into and leverage one of the 5 negotiation styles during your discussions, and how to recognize the other party's negotiation style so you can hopefully overcome it through the discussions. Also, we'll discuss how to evaluate the offer you may receive so you can decide if you want to accept it or to go back and renegotiate, or just say no thank you and say I'm going to walk away. This isn't the option for me. Okay. Next slide, please. This is when not to negotiate. This is important as you want to make sure you don't give things away too early in a discussion, and you want to give yourself some time to respond versus react. So when you see this, sometimes you're going to see this come up on the application. If asked on the application for salary requirements, respond with negotiable if you can. Sometimes it won't let you put in letters versus numbers. So if you can't, then you can put in things like 000 if you have to put in a number. That's letting someone know I'll talk about this later, right? But I didn't have a different way to input this data. I say don't negotiate out of the gate if you can avoid it. When it comes to this application, it's really important. Don't be the first to bring up salary. And this goes for the whole process as you're going step by step. Let them be the ones to bring it up versus you, okay? When it comes to your looking at routine job discussions with your current employer, don't negotiate during those routine job discussions. This could come up with things at work like, what's your salary history? Where are you at? How much are you making right now? This could be, what does it look like for your current role? You don't want to give your salary information away and what your requirements are and be essentially removed from a process based off of just that number versus what else can I bring to the table? How else can I lean into this position to make a change? You want to have the ability to have those conversations. If you're asked your salary requirements during an interview, state that you're really interested in the opportunity and would like to learn more before discussing that salary. I'm excited. I want to know more about the company. Don't rule me out, but I'm not ready to have that discussion just yet. Don't negotiate without an offer in hand. So sometimes we will start this process and we don't have an offer from anyone, and they're asking you these questions. I say wait until you have that offer. If they bring it up during a phone screen, a first interview, sometimes they're going to really pressure for this information. Be clear, ask, is this an offer? If so, then I'll begin the process. If not, then ask them instead to provide you the salary range for the position. You can respond with, I'm comfortable with that range. If not, then you'll know you'll need to negotiate. And so you're using this again as building your path forward. What do I need to do with the next steps in my process if you choose to pursue that position? After the interview, you're going to want to respond, I'm really interested. I'm glad to respond to a specific offer if they're pressuring you through an interview to provide salary information. I'm glad to if there's an offer, right? That's what we want to lean into. As a current employee, don't begin negotiations without being prepared for the discussion. Don't just say things like, sometimes we'll see people say, well, I want 50,000. If I don't get it, I'm leaving, because they're frustrated. You want to make sure you're preparing your thoughts and scheduling a meeting with decision makers to discuss. Be prepared in advance for having that discussion. So these would be the times that you're not going to jump into things for that negotiation. Any questions on what I've covered here so far? What do you do when the salary range is not posted? You're going to ask if you're at a point to go down the path of the salary discussion. So don't get into that until the time that you're ready to have that conversation and you've done your homework and you've done your preparation. But once you're ready to, what's the salary range for the position? Can you disclose that information? It's okay to ask. They may tell you, well, I can only give this much information. And you go off of what you can get from that conversation, but you can also go into being prepared. And we're going to talk on the next slide about some of the things that you can help to gather that data. So this is going to look at things from an employer starting point first. Often employers are going to come in lower with their salary ranges than what they can offer because they expect a candidate to negotiate. This provides some flexibility for you to do so. Some employers, like startups, nonprofits, charities, they don't have a large budget to pull from. So they're going to come in maybe a little bit more transparent with those salary ranges. This is what we can offer. This is what we have available. But others aren't going to give all of that information on the front end. Most employers do have a salary range for the position, similar to what I have posted here on this slide, where we're looking at, let's say if it's an administrative assistant, the different percentiles for the range for that position. They may also have it in a fashion where this is our minimum for the position, our mid, and our max. Typically, employers don't want to hire someone at the max, as they want to allow room in that range for future salary increases. If you're in the max, you could potentially use the strategy, I'm going to start here, and in 6 months, if I'm meeting all requirements of the role, we can have discussions to determine if the role needs to be elevated to a senior title. That might be something you're able to negotiate through the process that we start here. Instead of ruling me out, it's something we could grow into. Okay. With employees and job seekers, their starting point is pre-negotiation. This is your planning stage. This is where you have to start doing your homework. For a job seeker, it's critical. Know what are your minimums. What is it that I'm willing to settle on in terms of salary? What is it I'm not willing to settle on? And what is my must-have? Is this something in terms of, would I be willing to take this salary and, get this much more time off? So would I negotiate time off instead of salary? Would I look at, is remote work something that's extremely important to me? So maybe salaries down here, remote work's up here. Knowing what you have to have before you go into these discussions is critical. You should also know your skills in comparison to the job requirements as a negotiation or a leverage tool. So let's say grant writing. Is this a must-have on the JD? Then factor in that skill set. If you have that experience, consider the years of experience that you have had. What have your successes been? How have you been able to lean into that? What type of funds have you been able to get in from that grant writing process? and use this as a leverage item in your negotiation discussions. It's going to be one of your tools in your tool belt that you want to highlight, right? It helps you to provide feedback on why you feel you are qualified for the role, maybe more than what initially the company thinks. So if you happen to know, this is another thing you can lean into. If you happen to know what your colleagues are making, this information can be helpful as well. It's something most companies try to keep a balance in terms of peer equity. And so if you're getting paid here, but your peers are getting paid here, and you understand this because you've had discussions with your peers, it could be a leverage point for your employer on why you need to be brought up to that same peer equity level. I am not saying, I just want to be clear, I'm not saying go poll them. But if you've had those discussions because you know you're at lunch and things come up and you're having chats and you know this information, and it's okay to use that information in your discussions if you already know it. But again, I wouldn't just go out and poll your coworkers. So as we're starting this preparation process, we're gathering information, right? One of the other tools we can use is some salary resources. And this could be things like a cost of living calculator. So if you're looking for a job or asking your current employer for a raise, knowledge is power. Do your research, know what your position pays. And if you're asking for a raise, know what your cost of living changes are in your location and how they have impacted you. So, you know, obviously we're all living in the gas prices are way up here. Have those items and understand what that looks like specific for your area that you live in. What was it last year at this time? How much has it increased? So if you're offering me a 1% increase as an employer, but my cost of living has gone up 5%, that's just not quite helping me bridge the gap, right? You can use that cost of living calculator to gather information. Oh, sorry, something was just talking to me. So cost of living calculator, I would say take the time, do that research, understand what that looks like. That again becomes a tool in your tool belt to use through your negotiations. The other is some of the things on here are salary.com, glassdoor.com, ostarnet.com. These are going to be places you can go gather some salary data, again, by your location, by your job title, and sometimes your job skills that you can put into these sites to get information on what is this job paying, so that you know before you go into the negotiation, this is the range, even if you're not getting maybe the clear answers from the employer on what that max versus min looks like, right? So show your research when you're having these discussions. Say things like, I'm very interested in the position and your organization and believe this role is an excellent fit. I have been researching typical salaries for someone with my skills and experience, and I was hoping for something closer to whatever your number is. You have to be willing to ask for what you want, or you won't ever have a chance to obtain it. I know that's hard, but we have to be willing to do it. Questions on anything I've talked about in terms of the cost of living calculator, the salary.com, glassdoor.com, anything so far? Okay.
Christy,
So-
this does feel like a good time to remind our participants and those watching this recording that Together SD does have our compensation and benefits study that will be coming out later this summer. And we will have, I think, more than 40 job titles with salary ranges available across a pretty good spread of data. So we'll have some research specific to the nonprofit sector in South Carolina coming out for you to be on alert, be on the lookout for, because that can really help you go in with the information Christy says we need to know.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for calling that out, Mary Dell. It's definitely one of those other tools to add to your toolkit, especially if it's geared towards companies just like you. You're going to have a lot more of data available once they publish that. I think that's a great call out. Thank you. So what are things that you can negotiate? The rule of thumb, Negotiate for those things that you need. Make sure, again, you clearly know what are the things I need to have and what do I not. So in my experience with union negotiations, we would go in with, okay, with the union, we want to make sure this is our number one thing we walk away with during this negotiation, right? But these are my things I'm willing to give up as trades to the union to get this number one thing. Same thing when it comes to negotiating. What is my number one thing I want to have? And what are the things I'm willing to wiggle on to give as negotiating tools? So you need to know those. If your number one is salary, am I willing to trade off something in terms of health benefits, time off, or are those going to be the things that are my priority? Understanding what you're willing to work with. So you can always negotiate time off. This can be vacation, PTO, add in a sabbatical, your salary. This can be increasing things, not only your base wages, but potentially a sign-on bonus, a retention bonus. If you're moving, a reload bonus. Anything for a new employee. If I meet all of my tangible requirements by 90 days, can I get a bonus at 91? You set that up based on whatever your motivations are. You can look into health benefits. Can I, add on to those? Anything in terms of being prepared to respond versus act, okay? Stay in control of yourself so you feel prepared for that discussion. Questions on anything you can negotiate? Okay. All right, when it comes to your negotiating argument, you want to know your worth for the employer. You want to make sure you know you're fit for the job. What are the skills and experiences that I personally bring that check all of the boxes on the job description? You want to also know if there are things that you bring in terms of exceeding their expectations on that job description, and make sure that you call those out. Research the company, understand their culture, so that you know how you fit into the environment and what you bring from that culture perspective, which might just make it where you're able to hit the ground running and fit right in with the team. Highlight the things that set you apart from your competition. Competition. You want to put together a minimum of 5 items so that when you go into these negotiation discussions, that you already know where you're going to kind of be able to jump in and have some feedback if needed for the discussion. This is where you're responding versus reacting, where we have things where we're prepared, right? When it comes to negotiation, next slide, there are 3 possible outcomes. There is the win-win, where both parties win. There is, Mary Dell, can we advance one slide? Sorry, thank you. The 3 possible outcomes: the win-win, where both parties win; the inefficient but equitable, where all items are shared equitably between both parties; and the win-lose, where one party wins and the other loses. I know I would want mine to go as a win-win, back up inefficient but equitable. Definitely don't want it to be the win-lose, right? Next slide, we're going to go into the different types of negotiation styles. So to help you get to that win-win outcome, decide which of the 5 negotiation styles you want to use. Competing, this is going to be the person who comes in, I win, you lose, is kind of how they approach the conversation. They can appear ruthless in chasing down their outcome with little concern for the other party. They're very much driven by results with a focus on immediate gains. They don't care about reaching a mutually beneficial agreement, and are much more likely to negatively impact a negotiation process within at all cost attitudes. And sometimes you're going to see this on that employer side. So you want to see, how do you overcome that, right? How do we lean into having a different style to partner with this person? There is the accommodating style. Its strength lies in its ability to build initial rapport or to repair an existing relationship with other parties at the cost of giving up some of their own interest, when a relationship is strained or damaged in any way. Opting for this style could potentially make up for and help to build communication for the other party, repairing any of that damage. Avoiding, I think of this as the ostrich, the head in the sand. This style is commonly used more than we would think. It's usually used by parties that cannot stand conflict or those that have difficulties communicating with others directly. Compromising is effective in situations in which negotiators are under extreme time pressure and are pitched against an opponent that they already know they can trust. So they already have a rapport level and they have a partnership. With that, they can have the luxury of time to explore collaborative efforts and build that relationship and engage in kind of a win-win outcome. A win-lose outcome. It's going to be more of that equitable. Then you'll have the collaborative. These are different because while keeping their own interest in mind, they are willing to put time aside to build and strengthen their relationships with their business partners. They believe the true value of a negotiation is found when both parties win, as it will likely result in solutions that help benefit both parties. So you want to lean into, when you're having these discussions, if it was me, collaborating or compromising, but I would tend to go collaboration first. That's just how I would engage. Questions on the negotiation styles? Okay. Next, we're going to go to evaluate the offer. So with this, when reviewing the offer, think about your must-haves again. Did you get them on the offer? Did you reach those? If not, is this offer something that you feel is fair and equitable? Did you reach that win-win outcome? Were you able to leverage your arguments, skills, knowledge, and reach your desired outcome? It's okay to say you want to think about the offer. I think this is important. We sometimes want to rush and say, I'm going to take this offer right now, but you can say, I need to think about it. Typical time frame would say is 48 hours before you get back to them with your response, while you do take the time to look it over and make sure that it's something that does meet your needs. Make sure you get the offer in writing. If it is a new job, get it in an offer letter. If it is a promotion, this might be a form the company uses. They might have a form they use. They might have a process in, their HRIS system that triggers something to you within the system. It could even be a letter or an email, but make sure you have something tangible. If the offer you feel isn't fair and equitable and you didn't reach that good outcome, then keep looking until you do. If it's your current employer, you may need to be patient and revisit during your next one-on-one to gain an understanding of why it wasn't possible at this time. And then start having the conversations on how do we build a path to develop to help you be ready for the next review or begin the process again. Remember, the negotiation is a process and it's not something that should be feared. Any questions?
I have a little question.
Okay.
Just to throw some nuance onto the pile here.
Mm-hmm.
Suppose one is an officer of the organization and has an intimate knowledge of the organization's finance and budget, and in fact is responsible for preparing said budget each year.
Mm-hmm.
Where is that dividing? Like, how do you balance your responsibility to the organization's finances and financial soundness with your own interests?
Just a clarifying question, Ben. Is this something where you know that they have the room to provide a higher salary
Or not?
or not? Okay. So
Or so.
So if they do, I think you're using again those tools in your toolkit, right? And you're going in and saying, look, I know that we have some room in the budget. Here's why I think that I am, entitled, and maybe entitled is the wrong word, why I feel like I've earned this. And this is what I've delivered. You're going to really want into what have you done, lean into what have you accomplished in your job? What is it that you bring to the table that you feel makes it something you should have an increase for? When it's the opposite situation and there isn't a budget for it, I think that makes it harder, right? So if it's the salary that they can't give, do you lean into other things that maybe are priorities for you in terms of the time off? Time off has a financial value, right? Could that be the trading point? But it makes it harder when they don't have the budget and you know they don't have the budget.
Yeah, I asked because I know we have a few executive directors on here and probably some finance managers as well, and I have looked at it as something of an ethical issue as well, because it's like, and it may not be, maybe I'm just got it's all whizzled up in my head, but it's sort of like, okay, I have knowledge that is not necessarily public knowledge. And I mean, granted, nonprofits finances are pretty open. But I was just wondering about that, because it's like, you know, my responsibility to the organization ending the year in the black, it also being a performance goal.
Yeah, you're certainly going to have a trade-off, and it is hard, but
Yeah.
you as an employee always can have these discussions. It doesn't mean the employer is going to say yes,
Right.
but you may get at least a better insight into why they're going to say no, and maybe it helps to have, you know, at least the beginning of a discussion on how do we build this path going forward, and it starts having more open communication on what does it look like for you in 6 months, what does it look like for you in a year, right?
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you.
Christy, I think we're hearing a lot of questions too. I know we've been talking primarily about from the employee perspective, but what should employees be thinking about cost of living right now with inflation? Should everyone be asking for a cost of living? And how do you balance the difference between asking for a cost of living adjustment versus asking for a merit-based increase?
So a cost of living, obviously, you know, I put out that there's the cost of living calculator, right? And I think we're all feeling it. So it's something that I think companies need to lean into first and primarily look at, are we able to do something outside of our performance merit piece? They really should be taking that as their strategy on how to retain employees, because right now it is an employee market. And as an employer, you want to make sure you're taking those things into consideration, right? So you've got to balance both sides from the employer perspective. As the employee, you can ask, if your employer doesn't have the ability to do it, what else can you lean into that you're willing to shift if they can't give an additional cost of living increase? Maybe when it comes to the performance side of things, when that happens, okay, you couldn't do a cost of living if your performance is 1 to 3%. Maybe we could talk a 3 to a 4% increase for performance versus the norm to help offset some of that cost of living. But it's, again, you have to be willing to ask for it, and you have to come up with your strategy as the employee on how you're going to do that. But you have to know what's going on with the employer first. Does that make sense? I hope that answered your question.
Any other questions? I'm going to put a poll question up while we're chatting. So have you ever asked and negotiated for salary or benefits? And what's your experience doing that for those of us that are still on here? Curious to see.
Have any of you negotiated in prior jobs for salary, time off, benefits? Everything is negotiable if you ask, right?
I was always surprised when I was an executive director how many people just accepted exactly what we offered.
And again, I think it goes back to, we aren't prepared. We don't take the time to do the research. We're thinking that what they're giving us sometimes is their best offer, when maybe they're using it as a negotiation starting point.
We've got a good handful of results here. looks like most people have asked for salary if they've asked for anything. And then some of us are asking for everything. I'm with those of us who are asking for everything.
Good job.
But it takes a lot of practice and confidence. It's a skill that we definitely have to work on building. And I really appreciate, Christy, you taking the time to be with us today. And for those of you watching this as a recording, you'll see Christy's contact information in the follow-up, so you can stay in touch, ask any follow-up questions. The better we get at negotiating salary and benefits, the better we get at all getting what we need in the workplace to be fulfilled and satisfied. I don't know that we answered Teresa's question. What do you do when the salary range is not posted in a job listing?
So I think I did, and this is where
Okay.
you're going to ask for the salary range. That's where you would start, is you're going to ask them to provide you the salary range. If they, for whatever reason, don't give it, most times they will, then that's when you would go out to salary.com, glassdoor.com. You're going to do your data digging, and you're going to find out what should essentially that salary range be, and you're going to have a conversation with them. So I've done my research, and what I found is the executive director is in Columbia paying minimum of this, maximum of this. So what I would like would be X amount, and this is why.
Very good. All right. Well, this is exciting. Christy, thank you again for being here and helping us with this critical skill set. We're going to talk next to Shannon Talent of Talent HR Consulting. Shannon's got a wealth of experience in HR, working on the employer side for a large local company, and is now out on her own, making it happen for small businesses, including nonprofits. And can help you with all sorts of things, getting your handbooks in order, auditing your employee files. And then I can tell you personally that when I was an executive director, Shannon was the first person I picked up the phone to call when I needed to let somebody go. And so she gives just tremendously valuable advice. I cannot endorse her HR skills enough. And so I know she's going to have some great information about how to protect your reputation when you're leaving an organization. And with that, I will turn it over to Shannon Talent.
Thank you, Mary Dell. That was a lot of sweet words. I appreciate it. I was called the Terminator when I was back at Long's Drugstores, because I was the one that would go in and do the terminations. But will you put the presentation up? Okay. I didn't know if I was doing that or not. And I know we're nearing that 3 o'clock hour when everybody likes to take a long nap. So. Very good. I don't know that I would know how to do that. So thank you, Mary Dell, for inviting me to be here today. Was going to go through how to resign, how to go through the process, make your decision that you're going to resign. And then if you do, don't have any regrets about it. So as we know, some of us may have stopped watching the news. Some of us may continue to watch the news, but it is a crazy, crazy market out there. People quitting and not having jobs, people quitting and having new jobs. It's just, the market is just so crazy. And that is because there's 11.5 million jobs as of March available. That is employers looking for new employees. And there's 5.5 million unemployed people. So as you can see, there are way more positions out there than there are people to fill those positions. And employers are having to look at their qualifications that they have in their current job descriptions and changing those qualifications just to get people in to train to do new jobs. So there's a lot of new opportunity out there for people that wasn't there before because they didn't meet the minimum qualifications. And now the minimum qualifications are decreasing. But everywhere you go, there are labor shortages. It's restaurants, it's businesses have reduced hours or they're just closed because they do not have people to come in and work the hours. The number of quits has risen by 3%. And in 2021, 48 million people quit their jobs. So it could have been quit their jobs to stay home because they didn't have childcare. It could have been they started a new opportunity for themselves and became self-employed. It could be a number of different reasons, but that is a lot of movement in the market. Next slide, Mary Dell. The next slide will also show you the trends of people quitting, and it is a variety of different reasons. Like I said, the pandemic is still out there. Some employers were requiring vaccine mandates to come back to the office. There's just a strong opportunity for people to go and find new positions, and salary increases, benefit increases, all the kind of stuff that Christy was talking about in her presentation a little bit earlier. So here's some of the reasons people are leaving. Increased wages, like we've talked about, better benefits. Employers are trying to figure out how to provide better benefits, what benefits people are wanting. Is it covering more on health insurance? Is it covering more on family insurance? Is it providing more vacation days or more holidays? Providing floating holidays for people to use. Employers are looking at remote opportunities or hybrid opportunities, which positions can work completely remotely, or at least a hybrid, maybe a 3 days in, 2 days out, or 2 days in, 3 days out. And people are leaving because employers are making them come back. And individuals don't want to do that. People have figured out how to run their personal lives while taking care of their professional lives as well. If you have been at home or were working in remote opportunities, instead of taking your 15-minute break at work, you're now taking your break and doing your laundry, or taking your lunch break and going to the grocery store. You're fitting your personal life in with the remote work aspect. But when employers are asking people to come back to work 100%, that's not working for people. Also, you had your vaccine mandates. Employers were making everyone come back and be vaccinated, wear masks, and people just did not want to follow that. And then people are also, I think I spelled flexible wrong, but looking for flexible schedules. They want to be able to work when they work. They want to be able to start work at 7 and leave at 3 or 4. They want to start work at 9 and leave at 5 or 6, or break up the day, as long as they get their work done and not work the traditional 9 to 5 or 8 to 5, whatever it is that employers were requiring. So what do you do if you are thinking about resigning? So the first thing would be is to weigh the pros and cons of resigning or going to a new employer, or the thought of leaving, because make sure you do your research on any employer that you're looking at moving to. How are they going to be better than your current situation? Sometimes the grass looks greener on the other side, but it's not always greener. So make sure you evaluate where you are going. Ask people who have worked there. ask, do all of your research. You can look at the Google reviews. You can look at Glassdoor reviews, where employers go out or employees go out there and comment on the organization. They comment on supervisors. They comment on compensation. You can find a lot of data out there about employers. But before you resign, you want to make sure you have a conversation with your manager. What is your concern or concerns? Is it just pay? Is it your flexibility in your work schedule? Is it you want a hybrid work schedule? Make sure your manager or supervisor is aware that you have these concerns. The last thing a manager wants, or a good manager wants, is to be surprised by a departure. Now, if you've discussed your concerns, such as pay, such as PTO, and they're not being addressed, well, that's a good reason to look for a new opportunity. But discuss your concerns and be very honest. You can also ask not only about pay, but what does your career path look like in the organization? Are you at the top of the market? If you are and your career path is not looking bright, or you're not moving up like you want to, it might be the best time to go look for a new organization that's larger than the one that you have. And just allow time for your manager or supervisor to address your concerns. If they don't, then maybe it is time to move on. Next. Okay. So there are, according to SHRM, which is the Society of Human Resources Management, where I get a lot of information from, 7 ways to resign from your employer. Some are good, some are not so good. So we have by the book, perfunctory, avoidant, grateful goodbye, bridge burning, in the loop, or impulsive quitting or ghosting. So by the book is a traditional face-to-face, I am resigning, I'm going to another organization, and you explain the reasons why you're going to another organization. Your perfunctory is you resign and tell your manager that you are leaving the organization, but don't necessarily tell them why. So you're not providing them any data or any way to rectify the situation. Avoidant resignation would be you tell your coworkers, your peers, you tell everybody that you're leaving HR, but you don't tell your manager or supervisor. They hear through the grapevine, which is not always good. The grateful goodbye, the employee expresses that, they're really sad to leave. They enjoyed it there. Everybody was really great, and they'll do whatever they can to make the transition a smooth transition. There's bridge burning. Employees seek to harm the organization. So that could be printing data, taking paperwork, or any sort of documentation to help them out in the next position that they have, talking negatively about someone or the company. In the loop, these employees typically confide in their managers that they're contemplating quitting, or that they're looking for another job before they turn in their resignation. And then there's impulsive quitting or ghosting, where you just quit on the spot, or you just don't show up. And you just don't know. These days, there's a lot of ghosting. That's ghosting on the first day of a job. That's ghosting where they just come to work and then go to lunch and they don't show back up. It's crazy, but it's very popular these days. So the employers really appreciate your by the book, grateful goodbye, and in the loop sort of resignations. Again, managers and supervisors don't want to be surprised if an individual is just all of a sudden ups and quits and doesn't have that conversation with their employer. Next, don't burn bridges. And I like to say, and my mom always said, you never know will you see these people again. So Columbia, Lexington, all the surrounding counties, it's a very, very small world. And it's less than the 6 degrees of separation in this town, because somebody knows somebody who can find out the type of employee that you are. So if you were someone who just completely burned the bridge down, left your organization, took all of the things, left them in a bad situation, your next employer could find out about it, especially in a small nonprofit world like Columbia is, or Lexington is. So, does anybody have any questions about resigning without regret or comments? Anybody resigned and they do regret it and they want to share that experience? No.
I haven't ever done that, but I have had an employee tender their resignation and then asked to take it back before.
Yeah, so actually, as an organization, you can decide if you want to accept that or not. So you want to make sure, I think, because the employer can choose whether they're gonna, just get rid of the resignation and say, okay, you can stay. But the employer at that point has a choice to say, no, we're going to accept your resignation and move on. So you want to make sure that you are very, very sure that this is what you want to do.
And then we talked a little bit about, you need to give when you present these concerns to your employer, you need to give them some time to respond. How much time do you need to give them? And what's the line between following up and harassing?
That's a great question. So you probably have to make sure that you have a timeline in mind. And I think that is a good thing to address with your manager or supervisor and just say, I'm really thinking about this and I really am going to have some answers in the next couple of weeks. Or ask them when they feel like they can respond back to your concerns, and then you hold them accountable to the information that they provided you.
If you get the vibe that maybe you want to stay with your current employer more than your current employer wants you to stay with them, they don't want you out the door, but they're also not trying to jump over any hurdles that would make you really enthusiastic about staying. Should you confront that or just kind of process it on your own?
Well, I think you have to weigh the pros and cons of why do you feel like they don't want you there. You hope that that's not the case, because usually there wouldn't be such a disconnect, I wouldn't think, between how you feel you're doing and how the employer feels that you're doing, because hopefully you've had some performance feedback or you've had these conversations with your manager as what's working or what is not working. So again, I say most of the time that there's conflict between an employee and the employer is the lack of communication. So the more you can communicate or over communicate, the better you feel about the decision you make. So if you feel like you've over communicated, you've asked for these things, nobody is providing you feedback, then it's easier to make the decision that maybe it's time to move on. Maybe I've outgrown this organization.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. So the next thing that could obviously happen is that maybe it isn't your decision to leave, and maybe the organization has had to make some decisions on layoffs, or maybe not a layoff, but you get into a situation where your position is terminated. So there's several things that you'll want to think about should this happen to you. And layoffs are never easy. Terminations aren't easy either, because we all have things that we are responsible for taking care of. And it seems like when this happens, the whole world is coming to an end. But you want to make sure that you have all your ducks in a row. So the first thing, and it's hard to say, but don't panic, because it's not going to be the end of the world. You know, as they say, if a door closes, a window opens, or whatever happens. But there are different things that you can ask for in a situation like this. You can ask about a severance. If there's a layoff, a lot of times they do severance agreements. What does that look like? How many weeks is it? Can you negotiate additional weeks for time served? Sometimes organizations will pay 1 week for each year of service up to an X amount of weeks. But there's always some wiggle room. If you've been there for, 5+ years, 10+ years, you may want to see if you can get a little bit more. Confirm when your benefits might end. So sometimes benefits end depending on the contract with the insurance carriers. They end on your last day of employment, or it could run until the end of the month. Or if it's in a layoff situation, or even a termination, you can ask to extend your benefits for a month or two. You just want to make sure that you know when that ends. So you can either go on a spouse coverage, you can find marketplace coverage, or you can look into COBRA, which is another thing. Does your organization provide COBRA? It may not be large enough to provide continuing health benefits. So that's a question that you would want to ask too. PTO, or paid time off, or vacation, is that paid out? Depending on what your policy says, sometimes the policy says we do not pay out PTO at termination. Your policy could say we do pay it out as long as you have been an employee in good standing. So you want to make, even if the policy doesn't say that they pay it out at a layoff, you want to make, you can ask. That's a negotiation tactic too, to ask for your PTO to be paid out. It's not a law to pay out accrued PTO or vacation, but again, you may want to look at your policy. That's if you're resigning as well, because you'll want to know, if you resign, will you lose your PTO? Maybe you need to take your PTO and then put in your 2 weeks notice. You just have to look at what your company policy is. If it's a termination, could be for cause, you want to ask if you can resign instead. Sometimes employers will let you resign instead of putting an involuntary termination on your record. You also want to ask what information will be provided to prospective employers. I always find it's good practice that employers only give out your title and your dates of employment. Employers really should not be providing any additional information. They could probably say if you're eligible for rehire or not, but I wouldn't even advise for that, because you could get in trouble if you give more information than that for negligent referencing. So I would just ensure that your employer is only going to give out your dates of hire and your job title. And then you can also ask for a letter of reference from your supervisor, from the CEO, from someone on a leadership team. I've even seen, for instance, where the employee has written the reference and the employer signs it just to make it easier, because they do say that, sometimes employers will say, yeah, I'll write you a letter of reference, and then it just gets down to the bottom of their list. It's a lot easier if you say, can I provide the letter of reference, and you redline it and make your corrections and then send it back. You'll also want to look at any contracts or anything like that you have that may require you to pay back maybe education, or maybe an advancement of wages, or would you owe anything back to the organization? And then if you have a 401k loan, You want to make sure that you take care of your 401k loan so that if you are terminated, either you can continue to pay that loan back, otherwise it will go into default and count as earned income, and you will have to pay taxes on that. All right, I think that was the end, right, Mayor Dell? Does anybody have any additional questions? I know that was kind of quick.
Shannon, that was so helpful. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this with us today, to talk through both resigning and terminations. I think those are the things that you have to be prepared for, because they're going to impact you at some stage in your career, or someone you know, and what great information to be prepared to offer advice on. We are recording, so we know folks will be watching this after the fact. You'll have access to our presenters and their contact information, so you can reach out to them for support and advice as you're moving forward with your career and with your career questions. We appreciate everybody taking the time to be here today, to be with us, whether you're here live or you're watching down the road. We know that there's probably been a long time for most of us since we were in high school and had a guidance counselor, and we went and met with them, you know, a couple times a year to talk about our career path. But we're really thankful to have people like Shannon and Christy and Franklin along the journey with us as adults as we navigate our professional careers in these sticky situations. I think if we heard anything today, it's the critical importance of having open and honest communication with your colleagues, with your managers, and with yourself about what you need to be focused on to get to the next stage of your career, to know what those expectations are, and to be brave and willing to ask for them. So thank you again to everyone for being here.